Thank you. And thank you all for being here. My name is Himaja Nagireddy, and I am a proud first-generation Indian American and candidate for Acton Select Board. I've called Acton home for 19 years, including having attended K through 12 grades here, and I'm currently a Master's of Science student in Environmental Health at Harvard. My journey in public service really began with volunteering at Household Goods right here in Acton. From there, I expanded my advocacy to those in marginalized communities by developing toxic substances reduction policies at the Massachusetts State Legislature. And this year, I've served vulnerable communities in our area by setting up a COVID-19 at-home testing program at the Brigham and Women's Hospital for people in our area. Everything I do is really grounded in the fundamental importance of building representation, inspired by my work on the Harvard Dean's Advisory Committee on Diversity and Inclusion and the United Nations Association of the USA National Council. Through these experiences, as well as others, having worked for USAID, the CDC, and the Massachusetts Executive Office for Energy and Environmental Affairs, I have had the opportunity to engage in collaborative decision-making, collecting and interpreting data, and implementing outreach programs to uplift and empower underrepresented voices. I care deeply about Acton, about my home, and I believe that the people who make up the highest governing body of our town should be more representative of our community's diversity. Around 1/3 of Acton residents are people of color, and nearly 1/3 are people below the age of 30. As a young woman of color, I am eager to bring a vital perspective to the Select Board. I'm running today to represent the richness of our community and to bring innovative, fiscally responsible, and positive forward solutions to our town. Acton matters to me, and I want to give back to this town. I envision a town where we can continue to preserve our Acton environment by conserving natural land and critical environmental areas to create sustainable green spaces and improve community garden efforts. I believe we can and should also do more to support seniors and people with disabilities by sustainably increasing affordable and mixed-use housing, increasing transportation access, and access to mental health and well-being services. To promote public health and well-being, which is a theme we can all appreciate at this point in the year, I believe Acton should explore allocating resources to increase the number of mental health counselors and social workers with diverse backgrounds. And I'll go into more details with the questions, but thank you for your time.
Thank you. My first question, what skills and experiences do you have that helped you prepare for service on the Select Board? A couple of minutes for each question, please.
Thank you. One of my experiences that I haven't touched upon yet is my work with student government at Harvard. As the vice president of the Harvard Graduate Council, I represent over 10,000 graduate students and help pass resolutions, work with the central admin and individual school governments, other student organizations, including the media, and organizing events to address a wide range of needs and concerns of our student constituents. In addition to overseeing the proper management of our funds, which is a budget of over tens of thousands of dollars. This experience has taught me best practices that will serve me well on the Select Board. For example, setting personal one-to-one meetings, as well as facilitating and leading focus group discussions with people in the community to build trust and strengthen relationships is fundamental to informing the decisions that we make and negotiating and prioritizing the goals that we establish. And this is something that I have also done here in Acton, making an active effort to reach out to underrepresented voices, to get a better sense of what really matters to this town. Coming from a family that never really felt that we had a say or place in this town throughout my 9 years living here, and certainly not having someone in town government that looks like me, I have learned representation really does matter. And that's why I feel really passionate about this.
Thank you. Question 2, in 3 to 5 years from now, what would you see as 2 specific accomplishments in Acton resulting from your leadership in the upcoming term?
Absolutely. If I were to pick 2, as inspired by my environmental health background, the first thing would be to identify areas where we can strengthen groundwater protection zones. with the recognition that planning and zoning are strong tools for protecting groundwater and other natural resources in this town. And this is imperative to protecting the health and well-being of all our residents. And for example, provides natural opportunities for partnerships with, for example, Housing for All, both at the statewide level and the chapter local level, to ensure that we provide sustainable, safe, inclusive, and affordable housing. And my second goal would be to improve youth engagement in municipal government by establishing a youth council or an advisory board that can report to the select board. I believe it is important that we recognize the importance and the weight of age diversity in best informing the decisions that we make in this town today and in the future. Ultimately, at the end of my term, I will have felt that I really succeeded when there are more young people and more people of color who run for the select board in the next election. And just to let everyone know, there is no age minimum or limit to serve, and there's no experience threshold. You are enough and you are capable, and that's something I really want to make sure people know.
Thank you. And the third question, service member of the select board will require you to frequently consider, form conclusions, and ultimately vote on a wide range of issues affecting town residents. What experiences have you had in the past that will inform the way you will represent the community?
Yeah, I can talk about my wide range of experiences serving in leadership and advisory roles in academia, in the workforce, and in my community as a concerned citizen. But I'd rather spend this time actually talking about my own personal experiences growing up in this town. I personally never felt truly represented. I never saw young people like myself taking part in town government. I was never taught or encouraged to believe that my voice could matter. And this is difficult. Being an underrepresented voice is difficult. And it's really hard, and it dissuades so many of us from taking part in basic civil engagements like voting. Because if the people who are running don't speak about the issues that matter to you, and if they don't actively reach out to you because they believe your voice matters, you're not going to engage. Life is already hard enough as it is. My dad came to India and my dad left India and came to America over 20 years ago with very little money in his pocket, no social security. As a child of rural farmers in India, water rights and conservation efforts were things he learned about as a means of survival back in India. And he continued to stay interested in it when he moved to Massachusetts. And 2 days ago, my father was asked for the first time in his life to take part in a conversation with the commissioner from the Acton Water District to share his thoughts about water access in Acton. It took over 20 years for someone to pay attention to his voice, and I'll never forget the happiness I saw on his face. These experiences have made me more conscious about actively reaching out to marginalized people in Acton to inform how I set my priorities moving forward and make sure that I'm really representing the people of this town. For example, for people that are not familiar with town government, navigating the town website and accessing proper translation and interpretation services for town documents and policy notices has been a real struggle. We need to do a proper assessment to determine what the specific needs are of our town and how we can improve our services to be as inclusive and conducive to civic engagement as possible. Thank you so much for your time, and just thank you for the opportunity to be here. It truly means the world.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And you kept it right.
But I ran because of the W.R. Grace groundwater contamination, and I had studied on 1,1-dichloroethylene. Boy, I knew my platform. And then I got elected, and one of the first issues that came before the board was a dog issue. And two neighbors were complaining over the dog, and I suddenly discovered that the Board of Selectmen has the power to put dogs down. And I had never, ever, ever faced a question on the death penalty for puppies. And Fido was like, you know, they didn't prepare me for this when I was a candidate. So I would like to ask both candidates, if you've got two neighbors and one has a dog and the other doesn't, and the one of the neighbors comes before the Board of Selectmen and says, you know, you've got to put this dog down, how would you approach that issue? Death penalty for dogs.
That's a very good question. And I think that one of my things that I hope to bring is this new perspective and really seeing how we're thinking about these issues and ways we can creatively think about these issues so that we can creatively come up with solutions that hopefully, to the best degree possible, benefit both parties. And so in this case, I'd probably ask a few follow-up questions in terms of, is it possible to rehabilitate the dog? You know, how much of a danger does this dog pose? Like Franny said, is there any way that we can increase security to make sure that this dog is well sheltered and still able to stay with its family? And I think that these are questions that need to be asked. And that's one of the things that I really hope to bring is a more critical and interesting and creative and innovative perspective into whatever we do, so that we do have these unique perspectives and we can think more deeply about these issues and how we can move forward with solving them. Because it may seem to us like a small issue, but to the owners, it's a huge issue. It's a member of their family in many circumstances and in many ways. And so being empathetic is also a really critical part of that as well.
The strangest event I ever encountered as a selectman was getting called at midnight by the fire chief, being told that there was a styrene leak at the WR Grace plant in South Acton, and that within minutes, most of South Acton and a good chunk of West Concord could be a hole in the ground because the chemicals were incredibly volatile. And so at midnight, as the chair of the board, I had to order the evacuation of a good chunk of the town. So, you know, this is, I guess, a variation on the 3 a.m. in the morning call that is often asked in presidential campaigns. But what is the biggest crisis that you've had to deal with? And are you cool under fire?
Yes, absolutely. I think that when you're on the select board and you have to deal with these issues, especially like you said, environmental health ones, and ones that directly affect the well-being of people in this town, you have to be on call, regardless of what the situation is. You have to be on call. And for me, if I think about it, probably the biggest concern and the biggest emergency that I've had to deal with personally was through my work at the Brigham and Women's Hospital. So when COVID was first starting out and the outbreak was going on, people and me, myself, and my family were really concerned. We had no idea what was going on. We didn't know how to get tested. The science was still developing on COVID-19. And with me being a full-time student, I had to take out 40 hours per week out of my day to answer hundreds of emails and calls. I was on call well into the night and well into the early mornings, talking with people, making sure that our staff was well handled and was given the resources that they needed to do their job in order to reach out to people. And that was a really difficult 2-3 weeks. That was 2 to 3 weeks on call. At the end, we had made over 400 calls and messages and texts, and we'd reached out to people, and we were able to, in our own capacity as a support staff for the infectious disease unit at the Brigham and Women's Hospital, we were able to make an impact. We were able to talk with so many people, and for every single person we talked to, just to give them the reassurance that we were going to send a test kit their way, that they didn't have to go outside to get tested. If they had symptoms, they could reach out to our clinical staff, just to give them that validation and that support that they needed when they really needed it, was something that was really meaningful and really taught me the importance of serving in these public capacities, the importance of being on call and being there, because at the end of the day, we're voted by the people and we serve the people in everything that we do. So that is something that I well recognize. That is something that I embrace as part of this job, and something that I hope to provide to the residents of Acton.
Wanted to say that I wish both of you could be on the select board. I am so impressed with both of you. Thank you.